Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to anyone watching live now or listening later on any of the podcast platforms. This is episode 57 of Fantasy Talks Live. And it's a pleasure to be joined tonight by artist and writer Riley Quinn. Riley, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
No. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Um, just are you reading anything at the moment? Have you got any book in your hands?
Not physically in my hands, but I did just start reading Gideon the Ninth. I've
Oh,
heard a lot of good things about it, but I've never actually been able to, get into it. So I'm about 40 pages in, just started. It felt like a good fall read, but so far I'm loving it. So I'm pretty excited to see where it goes.
yeah, I like it's one of those books I keep seeing, but I've never
Right.
it's never actually made it into my TBR. But
Yeah.
it seems to have been doing the rounds for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm going in pretty blind. I just know that a lot of people that are in the book spaces that I like love it. I have no idea what to expect so far. I almost am getting this weird blend of Hitchhiker's Guide and Dune that I wasn't expecting for the world building. All I really knew about it so far was that there's necromancy involved, which I don't think I've ever really read a book that has a lot of that. So it felt like a fun tonal shift from the usual reads that I get into.
It does seem from your introduction, it's a slight weird mix, Hitchhiker's Guide and Dune. Yeah, I'm sure these things always work out better when you read them than when
When
someone.
you read it, you'll see what I mean.
It makes
I
sense,
hope
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're for me that's the crucial page 40. Like if I make it past page 40, I usually 99.9% of the time will finish the book.
It's a good
uh,
rule.
uh, if I don't make it to page 40, like I know I'm wasting my time. So there you go. um, right, so what does your business card say? Because I know you've written a book and we're talking about that, but that's not necessarily your background, is it?
No, I actually have a background in animation and illustration. So I come from a very visual heavy background. I got an animation degree in school and studied a lot of film.
Hmm.
Technically, my degree is concept and storytelling for animation. And I focus primarily on storyboarding, which you can also do for live action film and advertising. So lots of framing, composition, cinematic techniques, which actually do make their way into my writing in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Very visual heavy, very imagery heavy. Atmosphere is a really big thing for me. But, visuals have kind of put me on the map in the way that they have. A lot of my work that I have produced, I've shared through my social media. And most people that follow me, I'm sure if I asked them and they were honest, would say that they follow me more for the art than the writing. But I've been working really hard on getting my craft where it is now. And so by the time this new book comes out, hopefully a lot of people will be excited to see the written aspect of my work as well.
Sorry, it's just going to be the stereotypical question. So, would I would I have seen your art somewhere, or would people have seen your art or your work somewhere?
Well, most people do see it on Instagram more than
Mhm.
anything. I wish I could say, oh, yes, in this movie, in this show,
Right.
but realistically, mostly social media. I did work on a couple of bento box entertainment movies that were released on Tubi.
Hmm.
So I don't know who really watches stuff on Tubi, but those exist. And then I also illustrated a children's book called Matisse Azul and the Magic Shoes that came out, I think, a year or so ago. Other than that, if people have seen my work anywhere else, please let me know because I did not put it there.
So good one. Um, so look, I'm fascinated by people that have got that ability that they crafted to draw and paint. Because I struggle to make a circle with a compass. So when when I see people drawing, to me, it's like magic. Like that's my magic when I see people um, drawing there. So what's your preferred technique or style? How do you approach it?
So for me, I think more than anything else, I do a lot of digital work. I do a lot of animation. And nowadays, unless you have a light table, which is a very large piece of equipment, you kind of have to have software to animate. But when I am working traditionally with paper, I would say that my favorite hands down is colored pencil. And pen specifically, I don't sketch in normal pencil. I only sketch in pen. And I have a big pile of sketchbooks in my storage closet that are filled entirely with observational sketches directly from life. And they're always done in pen or marker, something that I can't erase, because my instructors always taught me that you don't want to have the eraser as a fallback tool. You want to just commit to your lines. And I think that I'm really lucky that I had that very traditional training before moving into the digital space, because there's so many fancy tools available in the digital drawing space now that it helps to have a really strong foundation for your own technical skill before you start taking advantage of all the additional perks that come with a program on a screen. But I mean, I'll try anything. Though the one medium that I really struggle with is acrylic paint. Can't do it. I tried for years. I made one good acrylic painting and I said, great, I'm done. And I never touched it again.
Okay. Well, I'm sure your bad is much better than my best. But I think, okay, so my English fails me here. So I think were you talking about, the old, very big, at an incline tables where people used to. So have you used that, or are you part of this new generation that you've been brought up almost entirely digital? Oh, hang on. I think we lost your sound there. Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah, go on.
Okay, yes. I've tried it. I was not very successful. I never received formal training with a light table. Mm-hmm. All of my training was done on digital software like Harmony, which animators will know what that is.
Okay.
But I did always wish that I could have taken a class in it. But by the time I was studying in school, that wasn't really something that existed anymore.
Yeah, because not here for this channel, but I did interview a few months back Eduardo Rizzo. He's an internationally acclaimed artist, works for DC Comics and stuff like that. And he still works on a light table. He was giving me a tour of his studio in Argentina, and it's the table that his father built for him back in the 70s, and he still works there. And I think we still crave that craft that maybe, I don't know if you feel the same, because obviously you've been trained digital. But do you still crave that sort of handcrafted artistry?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you something funny. Every single digital artist that I know wishes that they worked on paper a lot of the time. Right. It really comes down to more of a convenience thing a lot of the time. It's very easy to carry around a single tablet. It's a lot harder to bring a big kit or, in animator's case, a light table. When I have the opportunity to work traditionally, I make sure to take advantage of that. And traditional artists is but I think that what you were saying, and a little bit, and I think that's why a lot of the times older animated movies where you can see the paint strokes and you can see the hand-drawn cells just have a different charm to them than anything that came after them.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I'm not gonna disagree with you there. I don't know. I mean, we'll try. I think the internet demons are playing up with us a little bit. So I lost you there for a second, but we'll see how it goes. So you've been doing that, and then what prompted you to try your hand at writing?
Well, I've always written. I just never really thought about publishing it. When I was very, very young, my sister and I would take printer paper from my dad's office, and we would draw and write our own stories in it, and then my mom would staple them for us, and we had our own little library of books that we made. And as I got older, the same part of me that loved animation and loved film and loved story never stopped loving written prose. So I was always writing. And when I was 14, I created this big project that I loved. And then I got older and I realized it was terrible, as you do. So I deleted the whole thing and wrote it completely again from scratch because I saw that writing advice on like 2 different YouTube channels. So I thought it must be true.
Hmm.
Deleted the whole thing, wrote it completely from scratch, and I realized I had an actual book on my hands. So I decided to self-publish that while I was in college. So during the time that I was in college studying animation, I was at the same time writing this trilogy. And when I finished it, I thought, wow, that was a lot. I have notes for myself. If I could go back in time, I would give her some helpful critique. But it was a really great learning experience. I grew a lot, and I realized that there was this different level of magic to writing something, because that way you're not creating something for the screen, you're creating something for the mind. And there's this different interactive level when somebody's reading your work versus looking exactly where you point. And I just fell in love with it. And I thought, well, if I learned so much from this and I loved it, I should probably do it well next time.
Yeah, it's a fair
So I
point.
decided to give writing another go. I developed another story, and we're super close to publication day now, and I'm really excited.
So did you take any formal training, like any writer's workshop course, something like that?
I think it's, I wouldn't say formal training. I've taken classes that
Hmm.
covered screenwriting that were very formal, and I learned a lot from them, but obviously that's a completely different medium. I would say most of my training in writing comes from editors and literary critics who have channels and accounts online where they break down their process and their criticism. I've watched a lot of lists of biggest mistakes you can make, don't do this. And I mean, I would say the biggest writing education I've had has really just come from reading.
Hmm.
And, trying to read a really wide range of things. I went through a hardcore classics Jane Austen phase in school. And then at the same time, I have all these books that are, written adaptations of movies. I have the Tolkien books, obviously. And it kind of plays into the thing we were talking about earlier with romantasy, where I make sure that I don't read in just one tiny bubble of any
Mm.
genre, because I think that's where you run the risk of falling into trope jail, where you're writing the same thing that everybody else is writing, which a lot of people are writing the same thing because it sells. But
Hmm.
if you're trying to do something unique and you're trying to push yourself, it does require sometimes reading things that you wouldn't otherwise read. Like, I'm trying to read Gideon the Ninth, and I'm
Yeah,
loving it
yeah,
so far. So good call.
yeah, yeah. I think you raised an interesting point because I also went through. I've read all the classics, the Russians, the Americans, Spanish, all that sort of stuff. But right now, I'm involved. I have embarked on a long-term project. I'm rereading the whole Discworld series by Sir Terry Pratchett.
I want to get into it so badly.
But I read it. I read it the first time in my started in my 20s, finished in my 30s, and I'm rereading it again. But I'm finding so much more richness and I'm getting so much more out of it that I wonder if sometimes we read certain books at the wrong time of our lives. Like, I don't know, if you're late teens, early 20s, and you pick something like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw names there, but like War and Peace or Crime and Punishment or something like that, whether you just we're not quite there yet to really appreciate and take everything that we should take out of it. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I think you're right. I think it's true across media, like with books, especially when they're very dense and they have a lot of layers. Like, when I first read the Jane Austen books, I did not know that there was anything in them really besides the romance. But recently I've been revisiting analyses of her work, and a lot of it actually is kind of, code that would have made sense to the readers of the time about the current political situation with, what was going on in France. And certain characters are caricatures of nations and their relationships with each other. I had no idea when I was originally reading them. I was just reading them because I knew that everybody talked about Pride and Prejudice.
Hmm.
And then when I loved Pride and Prejudice and I loved the witty dialogue, I wanted to read Emma, which to this day I think is the funniest one. I think it's her best work. But really, I mean, it's the same thing with movies. You'll watch a movie you saw and loved when you were a kid and say, wow, I did not realize there were this many jokes of that variety
Mm.
in this movie. It's all about context. Everything we consume, if you're not consuming it with the proper background knowledge, you're going to have a radically different experience than if you know more about it going in.
Oh, yeah, or not necessarily know more about it, but have your maybe your personal experience, or your brain a bit more further along the road to really appreciate, like going back to Discworld. The first time I read it, it was like, yeah, some funny bits. Like I would literally be laughing on my own on the train while I was reading it, and you fall in love with the characters.
Of course.
But now it's like, okay, this is like profound. There are so many meanings, and it helps. I'm doing a read along with other people, so we do a discussion every month, and you get different perspectives. So yeah, I think sometimes doing a read along as opposed to reading alone, that's not my pant there, is quite valuable. But anyway, so you decided to write your book. What can you say about it without spoiling anything, because it's not out there yet?
Right. Well, I've been having a lot of fun with that game of trying to share without spoiling, because as I said before, I do a lot of my marketing through my art and online, and the mark.
Why is this happening?
Get them with the flashy.
No, sorry, we've lost you again. I don't know
Can
what's
you hear me
happening
now?
Yeah, for some reason the sound does come in and out. So as soon as
I will slowly.
No, I don't know. I think it's the connection. There's something there that isn't working well. But anyway, sorry, I completely missed your answer there. So you were talking about the fun you were having trying to say something without revealing much.
So I've created hundreds of tiny teasers for this book over the past few years as I've developed it. I've, marketed it as I've written, and I've brought everybody along with me on that journey. But I would say now that we're so close to release, ultimately what I would say that the book is about, beyond the fantasy and the magic, is it's about a man who is caught between two worlds, because there's the human side, which is what he identifies with, being a human, but he's also a mage, and he has this magical gift that's associated with fairyland and the fairies who he is considering himself against. But when he comes into this situation where he can't rely on his human allies and he's forced to seek out help on the fairy side, he starts to realize that fairies don't actually look at him with this sidelong glance of mistrust the way that his human allies do. So he has to choose, am I going to continue to try my absolute best to be perfect in every way for these people that don't really trust me? Or am I going to align myself with this woman that I don't trust, but actually sees me for who I am? And while it is a love story, I think more than anything, it's about self-acceptance and when you're going to choose yourself over what other people tell you you have to be.
Yeah, I get. Yes, I get. I suppose it's. I think it's an idea that we can all relate to, and I think also the older one gets, trust me, the more you stop caring about what other people think about you, and I think you find contentment in being yourself. Okay,
absolutely.
But so, what are the tropes of the romantasy genre? Because I really like my only experience. I don't know if you can call it this. Is this book here? Just a bit of sort of man, but yeah. And to be honest, my personal policy is that any book that has got male nipples on the cover is a no for me. That's I don't get anywhere near that.
That's so funny. Well, I would say, I think right now what romantasy is experiencing is kind of more of a women-run renaissance, really. The genre is changing a lot. It's becoming much more mainstream, primarily because of social media. I don't know if we've talked about book talk yet, but that's been a very big buzzword. And ever since the pandemic, really, a lot of publishing companies are now starting to pay more attention to what the reader base wants. And a lot of people, primarily from my generation, I'm Gen Z, we grew up kind of with the original animated wave of like Disney romances. And then we also grew up with like the fan fiction world on the internet. So a lot of people from, my demographic are much more exposed to romance. They love it, and they think it adds a really nice additional layer to a.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't handle the glossaries and the maps and the world building and the languages. Enjoy in a book, I'm not going to be able to make you enjoy it. They actually really like romantasy as a segue into the deeper fantasy genre because it presents them with something familiar to them, but then pulls them into this larger world where they end up reading the heavier text that we might be familiar with. As for the tropes, right now, what seems to be really common is tough, misunderstood woman who is, you know, independent and she can handle herself, and then she meets some magical man who respects her, which is cool, and then she trains at some point. He has magical powers. There's a lot of jokes about men with shadow powers. That seems to be really common. I'm not super sure why. But then they fall in love, they probably fight some big bad, and that tends to be the story. And of course, there's variety to that, but the main really popular ones right now tend to basically be woman who's underestimated gets the chance to be powerful. She meets a powerful man, they get to be powerful together, and they're in love. Yay, the end.
Okay, but so I mean, you mentioned book talk, and we hopefully we'll get to that. But there's a couple of videos that I left a link in the description below that are talking about basically the sort of the slippery slope that this romantasy genre is, because from what I understood watching those videos, it's not that this romantasy thing doesn't become a gateway into the more, low, deep, sort of traditional fantasy that we may know. But what ends up happening is that, to use the language here, is that the spice level starts going up. And what you end up with is lycanthropic pornography, or dark fantasy, as they call it. And it's a completely, it's basically, they don't call it that, but it's pornography for women, basically.
So I do have thoughts on that. I think that narrative in a lot of ways is fear-mongering. I think that a lot of people aren't really sure where this industry is going to go now that a lot of the majority of what's coming out specifically in the fantasy sphere tends to be romantasy now. That's really more of a thing with publishers seeing it doing well. And so they want to buy up as much of it as they can, which is always an issue. When something blows up, like we had the thing with paranormal romance and Twilight, it's always a big scare. Everyone freaks out. They think this is going to corrupt the youth. But we've been dealing with this scare since time immemorial. Everyone's always afraid that somehow this is going to make things so much worse. I think that it's going to depend on the reader, because some people are going to read and they're going to love the spicy bits and they're going to want to read more spicy books. That would happen no matter what romance book they read. There's also going to be people who read it for the fantasy. They just happen to know that they like a love story and they're going to fall in love with the world building and they're going to go down the other path. I think that what it really comes down to is people are always afraid of moral corruption and of work somehow cheapening the work that came before it. But it really comes down to the reader experience and how we're welcoming. I think that a lot of people worry that the fantasy space can be a little bit closed and people don't really want to welcome new readers in if they come from something like romantasy, because they're afraid that they're somehow going to be debaucherous. And sometimes they are, because they're people. But for me, like, I do not like the spicy stuff. It is not my thing. But a lot of other people that I know in the romantasy space love it. Some of them are still really into the other stuff. Some of them only read that, but it's preferences. And there's so much out there now. We're living in this age of availability where you can get pretty much any piece of media you want like that if you have money or access to the internet. And people are experimenting, which is always scary. It's always scary to enter a new stage, but I think that people will find what they love. And as long as the fantasy space keeps growing, and writers are still experimenting, I think this could actually lead to a lot more cool stuff. I think we could be coming into a new age where genre blending becomes really popular. And I'm hoping that Romantasy is, a predecessor for that, as well as all the other stuff that it's inevitably going to lead to. But we've had raunchy stuff around since,
Yeah.
people were worried about that in the 1800s. We had the whole Victorian era. Everyone was scared back then.
So I do not disagree with you at all. However, I think the criticism I've seen is that, when mostly men consume pornography, we know what it is. So we do it in secret, using private browsing. We delete our search history on the internet. We don't have it unlabeled sitting in a bookstore in the romance section without it clearly being labeled, this is pornography, basically. That, there are very graphic, very descriptive moments in the story with no label whatsoever, other than my warning that as soon as I see male nipples, I know what this is about. And I think that's one of the criticisms labeled, that is trying to mask itself as something that it's not. It's way beyond the romance. And
there is a conversation happening right now around that in all corners of the space, even people within it. I think that there's been a push more so lately for disclaimers at the beginning of books. Some people are very against that because they view it as a form of censorship. Some people think that it's really important so that people know what they're getting into. Ultimately, I think we need more genre division in bookstores, in anywhere that you get books. I think where a lot of the problem happens that you and I were talking about before with how do people know what they're getting into is people can't seem to decide if they want to separate young adult, new adult, what goes to which age group. And, like even a couple of years ago, nobody even said new adult. They're like, what's new adult? A ton of stuff went into young adult that really should not be in the hands of teenagers. But it's kind of just the growing pains of the industry. I have hope that we will find a system that works a bit better in the future. But, for me, I just kind of use the internet as a resource. Like I said, that's not really my thing. I don't enjoy books like that. So for me, it's just a matter of looking up, does this book have spice? And if it does, I'm probably not going to read it. Some people go either way, and some people, they won't read it if it doesn't have it. But it's just growing pains of the industry, and I'm sure it'll all work out in a couple of years.
Yeah, I just think, I may be like blowing things out of proportion, or it may be extreme case, but you may be getting a certain book for your niece, your daughter, whatever, thinking is one thing, and you may end up buying the wrong book altogether. You're very young, but I don't know if you remember, back in the old days when VHS and videotapes were a thing, at the end of the video store, separated in a corner, were all the porn movies, but they were separated away behind a curtain to prevent, kids that were browsing in the shop walked in there and found, all sorts of stuff. So I think maybe with this kind of thing, you need to have that clear distinction in the bookstore, where you don't seamlessly transition from YA to romantasy to full-on pornography, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. It would be great if things were packaged more clearly. If I were buying a book for my niece or a younger relative of mine, I would probably pick something that I had read at that age. So that's my solution, personally.
Yeah.
But if not, look it up or find out what other kids that age are reading, and like talk to other people who have children that age. Until bookstores get it together, like there's not much that I really do besides use the resources that are available to me.
Okay, and you mentioned BookTok, so I don't have TikTok. I never liked it from this. I've got very limited social media because places like Twitter, TikTok, that's where conversation goes to die. But and like I said before, I think mostly, possibly, when men consume pornography, like I said, we do it in private, in secret. We are a little bit ashamed of it. We don't read. What's this book that is doing the rounds now in BookTok? All women. Morning Glory in the Milking Farm. You heard about it?
Never heard of it.
Right. So, okay, I haven't read it, but the summary goes: young girl full of debt after university, of course, so she needs to pay off that debt. So she goes to work at a farm where she is milking minotaurs. And we know minotaurs don't have others. So what is she milking? You can imagine. And it's very graphic and it's very descriptive. And there's all these women doing book reviews and going how much they love it. I'm very proud to have enjoyed. Like, I don't think you see men doing that. Like, very proud to have watched a certain movie and praise it. I find that weird. But I don't know if it's a gender difference, and I'm too old for this nuanced conversation.
Well, I would say ultimately, there's always going to be extremes. I think that some people are taking it that far purely for the laugh of it, honestly. And women being open and upfront about this in public spaces is just very new to us societally. I personally, I just choose to avoid those spaces for my own comfort. But it's what you're saying with social media, where conversation goes to die. You're always going to see the most extreme of any group online, and this goes for men, this goes for women, this goes for the literary space and the real world space. It's not my thing. I don't enjoy it, but I think that a lot of people really, what it comes down to is they are trying to make this a gender issue,
right?
Because they're trying to stay where they're comfortable. And up until pretty recently, it was kind of novel for a female author to break into a space. And like, for example, the book you just brought up, I'm sure it's a thing and I'm sure there's discussion around it. But the fact that I've never heard about it and I write in this space kind of says that it's more of a gimmick, which again, pulp novels have always been a thing. Yeah. I think, and again, it all comes down to opinion, really. We're also just in a new stage with the internet and everyone getting to have a voice and post about their life and what they're reading and what they're watching all the time. It's not just women, it's everyone. And it's something that we need to be really careful to train our younger people to know how to protect themselves from. That has nothing to do with books. That's just textbook internet safety, especially Gen Alpha coming up right now. I mean, I feel like I was the last generation to be sat down in a classroom and taught not to trust strangers on the internet. But you just have to know what you're there for and know when to scroll away, I think, more than anything else when it comes to unique things like that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I come from a very different generation because I grew up analog, so the internet didn't exist in my time, and it was all very different. I can say with my kids though, my sons are 10 and 7, so they don't understand a world where they kind of get instant gratification at the push of a button and watch whatever they want whenever they want. I think it's complicated. But again, this is the issues I have with book talk. You probably know more about it than me. We've been past half an hour talking about topic, talking about your work, and I do podcasts on the Discord series that go over an hour for each book. How can you have a relatively modestly intellectual review or conversation about a book on something like Book Talk, where you just clip in things for 10, 15 seconds? I just don't understand it.
That's kind of the big debate that's going on right now. I mean, a long form content is still my preferred, I guess, method of discussing media. I watch a lot of video essays, which are super popular on YouTube, where it'll be 2 hours talking about one book. And then the conversation continues in the comments. A lot of creators who are primarily focused on reviewing what they consume, whether it be literature or shows or movies, they have, additional resources beyond those short clips. It's kind of it's an attention economy. You have to grab people with those 10, 15 seconds, but those who do so successfully will typically direct them to their extended work. For example, a Substack or a Patreon or a YouTube channel, maybe a newsletter. Some people still do email newsletters, and those are doing just fine for a lot of people. With me, You know, I post a lot of 10, 15-second videos. They tend to be animations to promote my work in the hopes that people who are interested will go then to get my book. So I don't think that you can have a truly deep conversation in 10, 15 seconds, but I think that it can be the beginning of a conversation every time.
Yeah, but this is a conversation I was having with my friend Steve over at pagechewing.com. He's got great online community, podcast, everything. And the thing is that people say that they like book reviews, booktube, but no one watches them. Like, I know if I post a book review, I will get a fraction of the views than if I do a video essay or I give an exaggerated opinion because that day I just feel like raging and antagonizing people. So there's most definitely certain content that attracts more views than other content, and I think there's a difference between what people say they want and what they actually end up consuming.
I think that comes down to, you know, people need discipline when it comes to their attention spans. Like for me, a joke that I make a lot is that being an artist saved my attention span because it requires me to sit with something for 8 hours straight. I can't multitask art. I have to be looking, I have to be using my hands. And because of that, I do really love long form media. I usually will not watch a YouTube video if it's shorter than 20 minutes, unless I really, really, really want the information in the video. I like to have something long form. A lot of people don't, but those people who are into short form, I mean, I do worry. I would say I worry for what it's doing to nuance. Like you said, lots of engagement bait. A lot of people aren't genuine anymore because they're just trying to get those clicks, get those comments, get people to argue in their comments so their video gets boosted so they can make some money, which we all have to eat. I understand that. But I do think that there is a very big risk to be had in what's happening to people's attention spans around these conversations. People are expected to form their opinions much faster on everything under the sun. Research is not what it used to be, especially now with everything having an AI generated answer that pops up before you even search anything online, which is often wrong. Yeah. Often if you read into it, it's not true information. You can look up what's 2 + 2 and there'll be an AI overview answer. It's like 7.
Yeah.
There is a real concern there, but I would say that the people who are active in the space and say that they like video essays, say that they like book reviews, I tend to believe them. And maybe sometimes it be that they are just saying that to seem intellectual, but even if they are, you know, I'm going to encourage them. I'm going to get excited for them because I think that if we want the behavior to change, if we want people to, you know, sit with their thoughts more, explore nuance, gray areas in the media they consume and in life, we have to be encouraging and welcoming when they start to kind of venture into those spaces. And it comes back to what I was saying about the concern of fantasy, you know, real fantasy being such a closed space. I think the elitism can sometimes put people off. Whereas when I consider myself someone who kind of stands between spaces, I do everything I can to be as welcoming to people who are curious as possible, because otherwise they're just going to associate the old ways with snobbery and people not wanting to hear them out and not caring about their takes, you know, because everything's a take now. And it's a hard space to have a conversation in, but if the media that we consume is going to work against us, if the social media placed into our hands that if you don't have a phone, you know, you can't even get a job without a phone these days, really. If it's going to work against our brains, it's going to work out against our attention span, the best thing we can do for each other is try to have conversation where it begins. And oftentimes where it's beginning now is short form.
But do you think, because I've got the feeling that these days, when we say people, you know, to have a conversation, what I think most of the time happens is that people are trying to change the other person's mind. There's no real willingness to, like, you know, these are my opinions. I listen to yours, you listen to mine. Maybe, maybe not. We reach a consensus or an agreement, or maybe, maybe not. I change your mind, you change mine. We approach, or people approach it from it's like a battleground. It's like my idea is better than yours, and therefore no one is listening. It's not a fight. it's an exchange, and hopefully we both walk away maybe with a different perspective that we didn't consider.
Yeah. I think that, you know, a lot of the creators that I enjoy, again, in the literary space, but so much of what we're talking about goes beyond it. Right now, they're really trying to advocate for bringing back that middle ground. And, you know, like you bring up valid concerns, like with, you know, how are we going to show what if this is okay for young people, what if this isn't, especially in physical places like bookstores? How do you know what to get for a young person with all the blurring of these genres? That is a real concern. That is a real risk. But in that same conversation, there's also space for, okay, well, are we showing the most extreme examples to say that this whole genre is a bad thing? And I think that there's a lot of bad romantasy out there. There is so much bad romantasy out there, but there's just a lot of bad books out there too, like just in any genre. And it's to me, I think really that it's so new in the form that it currently inhabits. And there's a lot of experimentation happening, both with that and with the short form media form of marketing that the publishing industry is working with now. Everything is flashy. Everything is on fire, pretty much. And everybody is behaving as if everything is flashing and on fire, because that's kind of what it's doing to our brains to scroll the way that we do. Which is why it's nice to sit and have a conversation like this, you know, and present things not on 2x speed in a TikTok.
Yeah. And I agree with you, because again, I'm lucky enough to have these kind of conversations regularly with people that read as well. Mm-hmm. And the more you read in any genre, the more you realize how many, like you said, how many bad books or how many mediocre books there are. Because once you find whatever it may be for you, your peak fantasy series or your peak romantasy book or series, once you find that one, whichever one you consider is the best for you, everything that comes after is going to pale in comparison. So what you're hoping is that you find that peak book later rather than at the beginning, because otherwise it makes for a fairly unrewarding reading experience later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think with me, with what you're saying, like there's a lot of bad and mediocre books. I consider myself an optimist. And I think also in being a creator who has created a lot of bad and mediocre work, because that's part of creating good work. That's you have to make the bad stuff to make the good stuff eventually, which is something I tell so many younger creatives that ask me how I got to where I am. So quite honestly, just make a lot of really bad stuff, but learn something from every single thing that you create that you can do better next time. I think the same thing can also apply to the media that we enjoy. A lot of people who if you ask them, like, what's your favorite piece of media? I know so many people who go, oh, like, don't laugh, but it's this, because they know that a lot of stuff is bad about it. I think there's still plenty to enjoy in a lot of bad and mediocre media. And without the bad and mediocre media, we wouldn't realize what treasures our favorite pieces are, would we?
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. There are some books that I have got a special place in my heart, but I'm fully aware of their shortcomings. like, I know this is not well written, or it may be childish or whatever, but depending on the time in your life, when you encounter them and you read them, you know, they have an impact on you.
Right.
And then, you know, with a bit of time, you look back and you go, you know, artistically, this wasn't great, but it was my gateway into whatever, and therefore it's got a special meaning for me. So long as you, I just hate when people staunchly defend something.
Yeah.
Because I think there's very few books or pieces of work that are undeniably amazing.
Yeah, and even amazing isn't perfect. I think that if you truly love a piece of media, you should be able to engage with criticism of that piece of media.
Yeah.
And I mean, even tying this back to the romantasy discussion, again, there's a lot of things wrong with the genre, and there's even more wrong with how the genre is being promoted right now. Doesn't mean there aren't gems. Most of them that I know do not have male nipples on the cover, as you are concerned about.
No, I'm not concerned about that. For me, that's like
not your taste.
You know, it's the red herring. Like if I see that, like I know to stay. It's like a cobra, right? You know, instinctively they are dangerous, right? So I see that, I recoil back in horror.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just coming down to it, I think you can only really have the relationship with media that you want to have, but I would encourage everyone who is trying to engage more deeply with the things that they read, the things that they watch, the things that they consume, which is the big word that everybody uses these days. And I think that's where a lot of the problem is happening, is people think that they're just shoving as much in as they can handle, trying to just like make their brain go numb so that they can't think about the stuff that's stressing them out, because there's so much to be stressed about. But if you want to learn how to sit with something and reflect, it's healthy and good for you to say, well, these things about it are really enjoyable. These things about it, not so great. Maybe the editing's.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Grow from the experience of reading anything or writing anything.
So moving on, because I think you are the perfect person for that, and it's a medium very close to my heart, is comic books. If you can write and you can draw, are you tempted to wet your toes on graphic novels, comic books?
It's a good question. A lot of people actually ask me that question. I have so many people who, no, it's a great question. I love talking about it. A lot of people who love my work online get frustrated when they find out that I write traditional novels, not graphic novels. I think it's a beautiful medium. I love comics. I love graphic novels. They are such a cultural touchstone, and you can get so creative with like the blend of literature and visual art. For me, it's one of those mediums like animation. You have to absolutely love it to create a comic, because it is exhausting. Your arm is going to hurt. You're going to have to draft so many versions of one line of dialogue just to make sure that the visuals align with who's speaking and where they are. And for me, I have ideas. If I ever did a comic, I know what comic I would do. But I just think that I need to love comics specifically more than I currently do before I create that piece, because I always want to go into the things that I create as authentically as possible. And for me to be authentic, I really have to love the medium I'm working with. So I have some projects that I would only ever make as an animation, some projects that I would only ever make as a book. Golden Gossamer, which is my book, could only ever be a written novel. I couldn't make it as a comic. I couldn't make it as an animation. There's just too much going on inside the characters' heads. But if I ever do get the chance to have a team behind me, you can trust that I would immediately make a comic. I would love to make a comic with a team, mostly just because of the time constraints.
Yeah. Would you consider a collaboration, whether you be the writer and find someone else to do the art, or the other way around, or for you, is that an impossibility?
I could totally collaborate. I mean, having an animation background, you have to do most things in teams. I have team projects ongoing at all times. I love a good team. If everyone on the team is on the same page and they want to create this beautiful product and they all care about it, I can make something great with any amount of people. I would love to do that, honestly, if I could pick who I was doing it with, right? Immediately, so many people come to mind. It's like, well, I would absolutely illustrate for them, or I would absolutely write for them. But I guess we'll see. That's something that I've considered offhand, but one day I would really love. It would be way awesome to do it with one other person and just bounce ideas off each other the whole time.
Well, I think I'm not going to ask you, but you look insultingly young, so I'm sure you will have the opportunity at some point in the future.
Insultingly young. I mean, I'll take it, because the other day someone told me, they were like, "Wow, you barely look 30," and I was like, "Well, I'm not 30, so I hope I don't look 30." But yeah, I'm in my early 20s, so I got time. I got time
most
to try a bunch of stuff. But I guess I just take it as it comes. I think that the industry is changing all the time, and the people who are in it are always coming up with new ideas. So I'm just ready for wherever the wind takes me.
Just a couple of things before we close off. So you wrote your book. How did you go about editing and publicizing it? Because is it coming out through a traditional imprint, or
I'm self?
Yeah, which is fine, because I've talked to a fair amount of self-published authors, and you're doing all the work yourself. So not only are you writing, but you have to come here and talk to people like me, and you have to rely on your social media and stuff like that. So once the book's finished, that's only 1/4 of the job. So what has come after?
So I deliberately made a point to have a big gap of time after writing the book where I would step away and do other things so that when I came back to start the editing process, I would have fresh eyes. I did have a team helping me with editing because I edited myself for my previous work. And while that worked well enough, I just don't think it was the greatest call because there's always going to be things that you won't catch. Not just typos and formatting, but also very glaringly obvious plot holes that somebody else for the first time will go, hey, why did that happen? And you'll go, good question. I have no idea. But thankfully, you know, a lot of people around me are very literarily inclined. I was able to kind of bring them in, get their feedback. I compiled all their comments into separate documents, pulled those documents in when I was editing. I rewrote whole chapters at times. But I think what was different this time is I spent so much more time in the outlining phase and I was getting feedback even then. So I was able to go in with a lot more structure. Then I took that break after writing it. I came back and edited it. I sent it off to beta readers. I sent out some advanced reader copies. And what's been really new for me is just this much intention into the marketing, because with my previous books, I pretty much exclusively did it on Instagram. And I just, fingers crossed, hope for the best. And this time I'm trying to do more interviews. I'm trying to, you know, collaborate with other creators, send out these copies. And it's been very intimidating because it's the imposter syndrome is not, I don't usually struggle with that creatively, but I do struggle with it in the marketing aspect. So it's just, I'm just trying to put myself out there, put my work out there, because I have to use my own logic and say, well, if I want to get better at something, I have to try it. So
why do you feel like, because, okay, hopefully this doesn't feel like marketing. We're doing the, well, for me, I'm doing the easiest thing. I'm doing the easiest thing, which is asking you questions about you. So, you know, no one knows you better. So I'm just curious why you would feel like that.
I think for me, it's, and a lot of artists specifically, I'm sure authors as well struggle with this. It's very easy to be proud of your work. It's very hard to tell other people that you're proud of your work because of the fear that they might say, why? Or the fear that, you know, they might think you're arrogant. And I've always tried to push my peers to be openly proud of what they create because they put a lot of work into it. A lot of people wish that they could create their passion project. So having the chance to not only make it, but give it to other people and share it with other people, I think it's really important to be openly and shamelessly in love with what you've created. And you still have to be open to that criticism, of course, like we were talking about. It's so, writing specifically is so vulnerable to me because there's a deeper aspect of the soul in my writing than there's ever been in my artwork. I draw. So asking people to read my diary, even though these are fictional characters in a world that I've completely made up.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, do you want to think about these things that I think about and I really wonder if I'm ever going to be okay about in my life, except there's magic and fairies. Yeah. And then I kind of just have to wait for them to say yes. And that's the part that's scary, is the pause before they say yes.
Fair enough. Before we finish off with the last bit, where can people find you, your work, your book? You know, do this, you know, shameless self-publishing.
Right.
Publishing, self promoting. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Self-promo.
Yeah.
Self-publishing promo, all of it, all the self stuff. Yeah. So most people can find me on Riley Quinn Art on my Instagram. I'm also Riley Quinn Art Official on TikTok, but I'm very bad about posting there. As you and I discussed, TikTok is a lot. I'm also Riley Quinn Art on YouTube, and I have a link tree on all my platforms where you can buy my book.
Right. And then, before we go, I've got some very quick fire questions for you. So don't think about them too much. This is serve and volley. So let's see what happens here. I'm curious myself. What's one word that sums up your creative vibe?
Frantic.
What's fueling your creativity these days? Coffee, tea, or chaos?
Tea. but specifically chai.
Okay, all right. Last thing you watched, read, or heard that absolutely blew your mind?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Something I watched, read, or heard that absolutely blew my mind. Well, I watched Pulp Fiction for the first time recently.
Okay. Okay. I'm okay now, because if you had said you hadn't watched it, we may be having issues. Let's move on. Because Pulp Fiction is, when we're talking about once you see like peak of a certain
Right.
thing and everything below is average. Yeah, Pulp Fiction for me is peak.
Definitely glad I finally watched it, because every film professor I ever had would always talk about that movie.
Yeah. So, okay, are you more of a 3 a.m. genius or a 7 a.m. go-getter?
7 a.m. go-getter. I am like a bird. When it gets dark, I want to go to bed.
No, I'm with you there. Ooh, if your art had a theme song, was blasting on repeat?
I think it would be Flight of the Bumblebee.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's all over the place, but it gets you excited.
Was one tool, habit, or weird ritual that you cannot create without?
A ritual that I cannot create without. I have so many that it's hard to pick just one. Tool, habit, or ritual that I cannot create without. I guess ultimately the basic classic one is I have to take a walk before I start. I have to go outside, no headphones, no phone, just walk in nature, even if it's just like a quick loop around a park, because everything in my life is on screens, especially being a digital artist. It's so hard to escape it that I have to have a very intentional period of time, typically 20 minutes, where I am just in this body, in this air, in this nature, in this life. Because without it, it's really hard to sit down to yet another screen and sit there for 6 hours creating something.
That's an interesting point. Okay, dream collaboration. Anyone, past or present. Who's on the list? One person.
One person. Okay, it's hard because I have to choose between like my art heroes and my writing heroes. Okay.
Let's go writing.
Would be Glenn Keane. He is an animator who worked on a lot of the Disney Renaissance, and watching the movies that he worked on as a kid informed a lot of my early drawing, and is the reason I went into animation. So Glenn Keane.
Okay. What's a piece of art or writing that you wish you could have made first?
Ooh, a piece of art or writing that I wish I could have made first. There's so many. Yet again, there's so many. I wish I could have made... There's a Rococo painting called Spring.
Okay.
I forget the creator's name because it's very difficult for my American mouth to pronounce. It's French. It's something French. But if you look up Rococo painting Spring, I'm sure it'll come up. And I was just in love with that color palette when I was first getting into art history. And I would do studies of that painting. I did multiple studies of that painting. And I just remember being obsessed with the Rococo period because of that one piece. So if I could have gone back in time and made that first, I'd be thrilled.
Fantastic. Almost there. Big picture, what's next on your creative horizon?
I will probably stick with Golden Gossamer, write a few more books in this world, but I really want to write a thriller because I'm just starting to be brave enough to consume like thriller and horror content, and I never could do it before. I was way too scared. But now that I'm getting into that space, it's so fun, the like puzzle aspect of it and the tension. Yeah. And if I could consume more of that media and be able to create a thriller myself, even if it was, genre blended, like a fantasy thriller or a sci-fi thriller, which I hear those are really common now, I would be really excited to try that artistically because I've never done anything even close to that before.
A romantic thriller or something like that. All right. And finally, when people walk away from your work, what do you hope sticks with them?
I hope what sticks with them after walking away from my work is that everyone who really wants to help, who wants to be kind, who wants to put themselves out there has a chance to make an impact if they're only brave enough to see the value that they have within themselves. I think that that applies not just through the arcs of the characters that I create, but also through the work that I create. Just me being an artist, I've had so many people say, I wish I could do what you do. And every time my answer is, well, you can. Especially now. I mean, resources are available to people. I encourage them to go out and try and pursue what they want. Because if you told me, 6 years ago, you're going to write 4 books, I would have laughed at you, but I would have wanted it to be true. I think what I want people to walk away from my work with is like, yeah, maybe I can do it. Maybe I can make that project I've been thinking about all these years.
I think on those inspiring words, I think it's a good moment to finish things off. Ms. Quinn, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. So I think this is it for today, folks. So take lots and lots of care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.